Borderlands 3 is a weird game. That's a sentence that would be inescapable in my mind at some point during the session. Just little moments that would take me out. One of these moments was the lead up to one of the game's first vaults. Places that are a millennia of years old and locked away from humanity, that we have just only recently found a way inside. You are not the only person interested in this vault opening. There are bandits racing to get inside before you, literally in this case, with constant chatter ripping off parts of their bodies and stuffing them with motor oil for the queen. Then there's the queen herself, giving a pep talk to her goons grabbing into you, reminding you every 2 seconds that they're there, in case you ever forgot. And there are these creatures called sentinels, beings that have been guarding the vault the whole time, only notable for being not remotely notable.
What?
Getting inside the vault is both very coveted and very difficult. Not hard for you the player, of course. When I entered this section, I was braining enemies in only a couple of shots. My seemingly invincible strategy of slowly walking towards an enemy and shooting them in the head appears to have completely caught them off guard, somehow. I only ever used the same gun unless a new shiny thing dropped. Then I'd use that on a few enemies, before going back to the same gun I've been using for 10 levels now. Whether or not I use new guns, I am a loot goblin by trade, so I was picking up everything that both glowed or had a pulse, which is quite a lot surprisingly in this wasteland of somewhere, knowing that we're going straight to a vendor, which led me to thinking, I wonder if there's gonna be any shops inside the vault. It's one of the few thoughts I had with the constant noise going on around me. Whenever I thought I had a rare moment free from bandit screams, an icon in the corner of my eye would appear just in time to say, that just happened, with a side helping of lore that only reinforces that there shouldn't be anyone else inside this vault. Which, given the fact I am currently on a warpath to be the first person inside since millennia, would be pretty strange. Apparently, stranger things have happened. Because, as I stepped into the vault, I was greeted by 2 vending machines, not dissimilar to the ones aboard the fancy spaceship I took to get here. One shined green and offered ammo, the other shined red and offered health. Both displayed the visage of 2 men just shy of being a millennia old, and would let me offload my bulbous, bulging backpack, which I did, happily, and continued on to fight the big monkey fella. I had this thought on my first run of BL3, and it only gets reinforced with subsequent playthroughs, because despite what I'm going to imply this section, I quite like the game, and most others in this franchise. I've played through these games many times, and it is my time playing this third installment that's really made me realize how strange this world feels. It is an overall buttery smooth experience. What would cause friction in any other game has been sanded down to a shine. The simple act of accepting a quest has been optimized for talking to an NPC, then holding down a button for 3 seconds. You don't have to go into a menu for even a moment. Same with leveling up or badass ranks. One of the cruxes of the BL franchise, its legendary loot, has been made as accessible as ever. Even with the explosion of colors that comes with killing a boss, picking out which guns are of any actual value really hasn't been easier. Unfortunately, this digital representation of my insides after a potluck doesn't match your backpack, with it looking more like my yellow-stained toilet bowl the morning after the potluck. These are both the best and most fun guns in the game to use. BL3 knows this, so they just hand them out to you on a regular basis, like a well-oiled machine spitting out glue on schedule. I appreciate the care I'm given as a player, but I can't help but feel like I'm being coddled by a machine. Every choice BL3 makes feels calculated, born from a mass of spreadsheets and data points. Weirdly enough, even down to the game's writing. No, not the quality of it, that's another story. But the sheer abundance of it, how it feels near every minute of playtime in BL3.
Hell yeah! Killing it! Always, homies! Boom, baby!
There seems to be a fear of silence and a desperate need to quell the quiet. So the game makes sure there is a constant noise, not in the form of music or environmental sounds. It's more engaging to hear a human talk to you, so most of the game's sound is people just yapping. Beyond just filling empty air, yapping is a reward. Every collectible you pick up grants you money, XP, a ding, and an NPC dropping their 2 cents.
Yeah, about that. Not the weirdest thing you're gonna see on Pandora. But seriously.
so you never feel like you're not engaged, or question why you're even playing this game in the first place. Have you ever walked around a casino? I'd liken it a similar experience of loud lights and flashing noises, disembodied voices asking you to spin the wheel, with eagles and fire alarms going off in the background. This is to keep you inside for as long as possible, get you to spend as much money as possible, but there is no additional spending in BL Free. What you've already spent on the base game or DLC is all they're gonna get. Let's go back to game mechanic for a second. The game's placement of things like vendors, fast travel machines, and catch-a-ride stations feels entirely separate from its own world, as if the game started as a wide void that players were dropped into. Then these objects were placed accordingly to where the players went and died, making it feel less like a breathing world and more like a casino floor layout, herding its customers like sheep to Willy Wonka's domain.
Get overexcited, don't lose your head, Augustus. You wouldn't want anyone to lose that.
There are a set of vendors just a minute's walk from the unopened vault I was talking about earlier, but players will have an increase of annoyance if there isn't a vendor right where they respawn from farming a boss. So just make sure there's a vending machine to increase that ever-coveted player engagement. This is the first Borderlands game to introduce sliding and mantling ledges into your movement kit. Much of the game's world is designed around you climbing over it like a monkey in a playground that just escaped an animal testing facility. Many side objectives are placed behind parkour challenges, except it's not much of a challenge when every jump you need to make is outlined in bright yellow paint. All of these admittedly minor nitpicks combined make me think this game was designed for humans, not by humans, if you catch my drift. Some of you may be rolling your eyes and thinking to yourself, well, yeah, of course, this is how games are made. You're right, games are designed in very deliberate ways to maximize your enjoyment. Although it's not something you are supposed to notice, it's an invisible hand that guides you. But I can't help myself from noticing Master Hand looming over me in the background, waiting until just the right moment to do the "get a load of this guy" hand gesture. It is a very strange feeling, to me at least, that I feel when playing any modern AAA game, as if I was playing in a human Skinner box, like I'm a little rat running around a maze looking for cheese to get my next dopamine hit. The scientists running the maze keep my rat paws moving by giving me daily cheese login bonuses. They keep my rat tail wagging back and forth by placing little rat-sized buttons that give crumbs of cheese when pressed. They encourage me to invite my rat friends into the maze by offering a cheese wheel whenever someone uses my invite code, Cheese to Meet You. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, modern games suck. Video's done, goodbye, the exit is through the gift shop and buy my merch on the way out. I'm not happy with that answer though, that games were just miraculously better when I was a child. The uneasy feeling I get from BL Free I've experienced from older games too. The feeling of not playing for fun, but that it's easier to keep playing this than to turn the game off and go do the dishes. Where does this type of game even come from, though? Was there some great turning point that changed how games were made? Maybe a slow escalation of game design to complete, in my opinion, slop. Or was gaming always like this, from the moment that video games entered the public conscious? I want you to take your brain back to the past of gaming. Near the very beginning, and imagine an arcade. I assume you already have an idea in your head. Mine is arcade machines stacked side to side, with kids playing them shoulder to shoulder, completely covered by carpet that can be only described as space, with shapes making up planets and stars, and asteroid belts and nebulas being represented by unidentified stains. There were only kids, who were screaming, shouting, and hitting the arcade cabinets out of frustration. The rage being barely audible over your favorite arcade song. Mine is the Daytona theme, if you couldn't tell by the song that's currently playing. All of this and more is part of the collective memory of the 80s arcade. But arcades have been around a lot longer than that, decades even. An arcade from the 70s looks nothing like an arcade from the 90s. The spacey carpet was mainly a 90s American theme. The same goes for the clientele. From the mid-80s onwards, arcades are for kids. Yet in the 70s and early 80s, arcades were a place for teenagers and adults. Kids were often discouraged to even enter them, for fear of them getting hypnotized by the lizard marijuana dealer.
Folks will tell you that I'm dealing in poison. But hey, do I look like the kind of guy that would do that to a kid like you? Yes!
The differences increase on different regions. An Australian arcade looks nothing like a Japanese one. What I want to focus on, however, is the American and British arcades, mainly because they were just a lot easier to research. I know. All of your angry letters will be submitted to my Foreign Relations Department. So, what was there to actually do in an arcade? Yes, there is an obvious answer: play games. But the main driver for kids going to arcades was to just hang out, meet with friends, and have a chill time over the holidays, or after school. Arcades are air-conditioned, giving you a warm place to go in the winter. There were a bunch of other kids there too, but it was uncommon to talk to kids outside your group. This type of environment is usually referred to as parallel play, where people play in the same space as each other, sometimes getting inspired by what someone else did, like seeing the kid next to you perform a fatality in Mortal Kombat, and have your blood start pumping so fast you could power a Super Hercules strapped to a bald eagle, with American flags acting as propellers. But you're never directly interacting with each other. Kids would rarely make new friends at an arcade, preferring their own groups. Small circles would form around cabinets, with cabinets acting as a buffer space between groups, and a few solo players sprinkled in between that space. A more contemporary example would be Roblox. Sure, you're often in large service of people, but usually you're solo or playing with friends, with other people being something you put up with to play the game. However, you are never separate from this larger group that influences your actions, normalizing stuff that to an outside observer might seem strange, like ever buying VIP access to a Roblox game, or spending your lawn mowing money dying on the first stage of Contra for 2 hours. Everyone around you is doing the same thing, just on different machines. So even though you are creating deep-seated anger issues that will only be addressed later in life, when you're sat in the back of a paddy wagon, with a drag queen's wig in one hand and a half-eaten McChicken in the other, you're still having a good time in the arcade. One of the many hallmarks of a visit to the arcade would be complaining to your friends about the arcade. Whether it's getting mad for dying and having to pop in another quarter,
This better be good.
Game over. Please deposit 40 quarters.
What a rip!
or grumbling that someone has to be playing the game, or else you'll all get kicked out.
2 Caucasian males out of money in Sector 4. Go to Code Red.
I'm sorry, you'll have to leave.
There was a general understanding of everyone that the whole place was a massive freaking scam. Because if you break down what was going on in an arcade, yeah, it really was. The games themselves were where this feeling of being scammed came from. The way most arcade cabinets worked is, you'll jam in quarters and get a number of lives. If you lost those lives, you had to cram in more quarters. The obvious intent behind these machines was to kill you over and over, and hopefully the game was fun enough you would willingly keep pumping the machine. That is the design ethos behind most arcade games, and why the era of arcades is mainly remembered for their absurd difficulty. This may lead you to think, if the game is a scam, then why not just play literally anything else? Well, yes and no. Let me give you an example of a typical trip to the arcade. Say you just got out of school, and you and your friends have met up at the arcade. To your dismay, you find out you are the only friend with money. Since at least one of you have to be played a game, you find something, anything to play. That's when Azumanga Daioh Puzzle Bobble catches your eye. Something about its leaderboard, or its captivating gameplay, or the player sitting on the opposite side, waiting for an opponent to challenge him. In any case, you decide to play Azumanga Daioh Puzzle Bobble, and you realize pretty fast that this game just kind of sucks. The controls are clunky, and the difficulty is way overtuned, but you just can't really stop playing it. You feel so close to getting on the leaderboard, or winning one round against the Bobble Master on the other side. The whole time, you and your friends are joking about the game and how much it sucks. Eventually, you spend all of your money, and are kicked out of the arcade. Sure, the game was frustrating on every level, but you were having a good time with friends. So Azumangadayo Puzzle Bobble was a fun game, I guess.
Presented by Coca-Cola. Look who we've got, guys, again.
And instead decided to go to the skate park with your friends. It was the 80s or 90s. That shit was radical. Every kid knew how to drop a grommet and hit a gnar. Arcades were definitely popular, but it was kind of in spite of itself. But why take my word for arcade sucking shit out of a rusty pipe? Why not ask what the kids thought themselves? In a survey conducted in the mid-90s, the kids' thoughts on arcades were less than positive, to say the least. I like them because arcades are good fun. I dislike them because you spend more and more money. I can't stop spending me money. I dislike the way arcades are a drug. I understand why people get addicted. They're rip-off merchants who own them. I like them because you know there'll always be someone you know in there. But if I have some money, I almost always end up spending it in there because other people are. These to me don't sound like the quotes of kids having a good time, sounding more like children understanding the system's rigged against them, and they should all unite and overthrow their oppressors, so they can play Azumangadayo Puzzle Bobble on their own terms. Despite the intrinsic feeling of Clash Conscious, these kids seem weirdly aggressive to arcades, even when they spend so much time in them. If you are a smart Kiwi, you would have noticed that this survey was conducted in the UK in the 90s. Everything I've said so far has been true for both the UK and America, at least for the time. A safe haven away from adults, where kids can be kids and partake in the local cigarette vending machines. But there is at least one major difference between the two countries. In British arcades, alongside video games, they have cabinets called fruit machines, which in the normal world means slot machines. And no, they are not age-restricted. These machines being easily available to children led to quite a few issues. As shown later on in the study, the kids are asked if they ever borrowed money to play both fruit and video game cabinets, with 58% saying yes to video games and 55% saying yes to fruit machines. You may understandably think that's crazy and insane. It gets even crazier on the very next page, where they ask if kids stole money to play these machines, with 19% saying yes, they stole to play video games, and 21% saying they stole to play fruit machines. Now, the numbers may be inflated because these kids are British, and you can never trust what they say, but sometimes kids are just more honest about their environment. Here are a couple more quotes about kids' experiences in the arcade. I like them because it's the only place to get out of the cold. I dislike them because some of my friends play the 20p machines, lose their money and get mad. I like the arcade because in winter is somewhere warm to go, and you can smoke in there. A quote by your average British teenager. You may think this should be cause for alarm, kids being in such close proximity to real-ass gambling. Well, some parents did. Just enough to start a government-funded survey on kids' experiences in the arcades, which had the world-shattering result of, oh, it's not all that big of a deal, is it? Because in the UK of that era, low-stakes gambling was seen as a family pastime, like playing mini-golf or chimney sweeping. Little Tammy pulling the one-armed bandit next to Miss and Mr. Tammy was a normal activity. I wonder if we have any modern-day reference to that, gambling being part and parcel in games for kids. Normalizing having a slot machine within the same arm's reach as Mum's credit card.
Foreshadowing is a narrative device in which suggestions or warnings about events to come are dropped or planted.
In the end, nothing really came of the study. The more unsavory parts of the arcade were brought up, such as the before-mentioned cigarette machines. Now kids weren't technically allowed to use them, but if you gave a guy 10 toonies, he would buy a pack for you. So, arcades kept the vibe of a seedy place for teenagers to hang out. During the time of the late 70s, both in the UK and America, this was the appeal of arcades. A secluded space where kids can be free, play video games, and not have to worry about parental supervision. This is how it would stay in the UK. Their arcades of today aren't too dissimilar to the ones I just described. Yet in America, that was never going to fly. It took time, but eventually a moral crusade was built up to rally against these dens of child hedonism.
Long hours at the screens, psychologists say, can lead to extreme introversion. Youngsters communicating in a video fantasy land and not with their peers or parents.
It's not addictive in the sense of a drug dependency where you're going to have withdrawal symptoms.
Whether you agreed with the sentiment or not, their voice was loud enough to get arcades worried. So, out of the goodness of their hearts, and definitely not because they wanted to avoid the government looking into their business both on child exploitation. The big arcade brands set up new rules for arcades, increasing surveillance and cracking down on any illicit activities, bringing in the new era of the sanitized arcade. Of course, the oddity of letting companies prey on children's herd mentality to get them to spend all of their money, it was put to the side, in favor of kids having a social space. It didn't matter what the kids were doing. They could be doing smack and hookah, as long as the parents didn't see it and the kids were doing it together, damn it. As the arcade entered into its new era, its image started to change in the public eye, from a den of scum and villainy to a moral safe space for families. Here's a quote from the US President at the time, Ronald Reagan. "The Air Force believes these kids will be outstanding pilots should they fly our jets. Watch a 12-year-old take evasive actions and score multiple hits while playing Space Invaders, and you will appreciate the skills of tomorrow's pilot." When you got Mr. selling crack in black neighborhoods on your side, you must be doing something right. Funnily enough, the era of clean arcades would also coincide with the arcade crash of 1983, when the weekly income of arcade machines dropped by 40% that year. To be truthful, it wasn't because of arcades caving to public pressure. It was because arcades got so saturated with crap that the average arcade game wasn't Pac-Man, it was Azumangadayo Puzzle Bobble. Arcades started popping up all over America, stuff full of the worst games you could find. Companies were shelling out millions of dollars searching for that one game that kids would flock to from all over, spend their allowance on, steal some other kids' allowance, and come back for more. Unfortunately, for the vultures running the arcades into the ground, the golden age finally ended. I want to emphasize just how large this drop was. This happened in the midst of explosive growth for arcades. In 1983, the year of the crash, the amount of arcade games were going up. Yet, this was counter to the decrease of new games being bought, with the effects finally being felt when 500,000 arcade cabinets left arcade floors. That's in tandem with over 2,000 operators going out of business in 1983. The fact they were even trying to still expand during such a massive industry-wide disaster is what's crazy to me. Despite all of that, arcades kept trucking along, but it never even came close to its peak, and has only gotten smaller and smaller over time. Oh boy, what a bad blunder that was. I sure hope the games industry had learned a lesson about overstuffing the market with straight garbage, pumping out new games and new studios to make those games, only to have them shut down when they don't make a more $1 billion.
Foreshadowing is a narrative device in which suggestions...
The era of arcades was coming to a close, as home consoles became something that people actually wanted. The industry changed and warped around this much larger, more lucrative market. Yet, the presence of the arcade didn't just disappear. Developers needed a base for what constituted a good game, so they would look at games that made money. Games like Azumangadayo Puzzle Bobble, taking inspiration on how the games made money, I mean. Though there are certainly many Puzzle Bobble games, console developers are more interested in the games kids played in the arcade. They got them to spend the most money, which was coincidentally the most difficult games, which perhaps wasn't the best inspiration for Ghostbusters for the NES. This ran the gamut of all manner of licensed shovelware, that the only way these developers could think of to make these games fun was to make them as difficult as possible. I'm sorry, I mean as
fucking horseshit.
Ass.
Bullfuck.
How a fucking piece of dog shit.
Ass balls.
Ass!
as possible. Games you would rent out once, break your controller, and never had the desire to touch again. To me, this really exemplifies just how bad arcade games were. Not all of them, mind you, there's an onion ring in every box of fries.
Onion ring! I got an onion ring!
What kids liked about arcades was hanging out with friends, away from their parents, being around all this cool new technology, or just having a warm place to go in the winter. The games were designed to be a tax on that experience. A very expensive one. When this ethos of game design moved into home consoles, they flopped hard, like an out-of-shape Swedish man entering a death diving competition. With the advent of rental stores like Video Easy, you could just trial and error yourself into the good games. So if you ever picked up one of these bad games, you would play it and say,
"Ass! Shitload of motherfucking bullfuck!"
Then move on to Super Mario, something actually made for the home environment. But it simply wasn't the same as the arcade experience of meeting up with your friends after school, goofing around with the little spare change you had. Because despite what nearly every kid at the time said about arcades, they still went there and enjoyed themselves. All of them, whether they realized it or not, operated under the assumption that this shit sucks, but what can you do? Having fun costs money, it's the way the world works. What a strange thing to think when you're just trying to have a good time, but it always had to be in the back of your mind, because if you were caught not spending money, you'd get kicked out, and that was that. It's the same odd feeling when I play games today. Even when I'm having a good time, there's always something trying to get me to spend more money. Azumanga, or whatever its name is going to pop out on the screen asking me to give her the free wacky digits on the back of my credit card. Ever since arcades declined, companies have been trying to find a new social space. As we saw before, when the arcade got eaten by its own greed, owning these spaces is extremely lucrative. They eventually found something, and funnily enough, what they found was going to have a reputation the opposite of sociability. The people who play these games often being labeled no-life basement dwellers. What I'm talking about is the MMORPG, also known as the massively multiplayer online role-playing game. God, that is such a fucking mouthful. MMOs have existed for a long time, dating back to 1979, existing in the form of multi-user dungeons. They had been building up a steady following through the decades as they became more advanced, until finally, in 2004, with the release of World of Warcraft, the MMO genre reached its tipping point, the crossroad of quality and affordability. The internet had become widespread enough that most people had a modem, and WoW actually looked like something people wanted to play. Yeah, I'm going after true ultimate heads in this video. How is anyone meant to enjoy your game? It doesn't have any gnomes or canonical leprosy in it, bozos. MMOs brought a lot of new experiences into the home. You could live the joy of joining a guild, sitting in queue for 4 hours, jumping up and down and someone else jump with you, grind up against boards with your fellow man, and you could hang out with friends. You didn't even have to leave your house. It was popular at the time, and still now to an extent, to label people who play these games as basement-dwelling losers. Antisocial people who never leave their cave in favor of the comfort of their mother's musty basement. Despite that being a true and factual statement, MMOs are one of the most social spaces since malls and arcades. Just because you can experience it in the comfort of your own home doesn't change that fact. It's as Snoop Dogg said in To Pimp a Nubian, you can take the games out the arcade, but you can't take the arcade out the games. The games were sufficiently outside the arcades at this point, and even though MMOs are the evolution in many ways, people still consider arcades as the more social, better experience. Perhaps because arcades are closed-off environments. You send your kid off to and they come back happy. It's hard to tell from outside looking in how similar these experiences are, for both good and bad. Whereas, people who play MMOs get shoved in your face as these plagues on their parents' income. Maybe it's just because the internet exists now, and it becomes a lot easier for these stories of people to get sensationalized. Maybe people just found it weird that grown adults would be role-playing with teenagers and have an immediate guttural response. Yet, it's this ability to roleplay that brings MMOs to the next level of social environment. You like the little gamer joke there? Next level. Aren't I so funny? It becomes a lot easier to talk to people when you're Darius, a level 60 human paladin who pledged allegiance to the Alliance, instead of Dave, the BMI 35 human Lowe's clerk who pledged allegiance to the Sailor Scouts. It kind of just makes meeting and talking to people a hell of a lot easier. Whenever you meet someone for the first time, you always have that combo starter of their first fight with Hager. That fucking asshole, that Luddite, that detestable piece of shit. Even just starting out in WoW, you're given a massive choice that affects how you play the game. Do you join the Horde or Alliance? Each having their own unique zones to explore, NPCs to talk to, quests, storylines, and guilds to join. These will let you form a camaraderie with your fellow degenerate, meeting people on the other side of the world and being united under one banner. Meeting people like Darius, who gets just a little too into his all horde races must be eliminated roleplay. With a world as massive and deep as World of Warcraft, how do you actually play in it? By grinding. Grinding is core to every MMO and encompasses a large group of play. At its base, it is spending time, usually on a monotonous task in order to gain a reward, like for an equipment or to make a number go up and activate your monkey neurons. Typically, grinding isn't very fun either. It's just busy work to get the thing you want. If we go back to one of the first games with grinding, Final Fantasy, grinding was an unpleasant alternative. If you were struggling on a boss or just didn't have the technical know-how of the game's mechanics, you could spend some time out in the fields killing monsters until you were high enough level to brute force your way through. It also had the side effect of making your brain feel good. Even though it's a dull task, you are always making progress, and you can see the tangible rewards of your labor. Grinding is a very bizarre form of leisure, because the closest parallel to grinding is going to work. Just replace sweeping the walk-in with slaying goblins, and cleaning the grill with harvesting herbs. And replace earning money and XP with earning money and getting better at what you're doing. The point is that for some reason we enjoy work outside of work, even if it is a similar monotonous task. The reason for this, I believe, can't be for an intrinsic reward, because there's no better reward than real money, and most MMOs don't offer that. Unless you're playing one of those MMOs where you harvest sweat by the bottle. In which case, that is a job. Get back to the sweat fields, Weiji. It's hard to think it's an intrinsic reason as well, because it's just doing the same task for hours on end, yet why do I like this? A cynical explanation is that people don't explicitly hate doing this stuff, they're just used to it from work. So game devs use gamers' apathy to shove it in every game they can to extend playtimes. Then we accept it because it's this or do the dishes. And you do get some sort of enjoyment out of it. Not much effort is needed. So little in fact you can just sit in your chair all day, giving yourself a slow drip of dopamine until you have to go back to school or work on Monday. It can put you into a fugue state, where you turn your brain off and just grind. Minimal brain power is ever required, so you can talk with friends or listen to music or a podcast, as you spend hours upon hours making your numbers go up. Imagine, if you will, you're a game developer working at Blizzard. Wait, stop, put that gun down, I'm in the early 2000s. Oh, thank God. You see a community of people start to form. People who are willing to sit at their computer all day so their summon goblin spell can summon a slightly larger goblin. You think to yourself, there's got to be how to make money off this, it's simply too good. You then look down to your monthly Japanese treats box, with its crumbs and empty wrappers cascading down your fat fucking body rolls, and get an idea. A monthly subscription is a model where you pay once a month for access to a product. This model lives and dies by people renewing their subscription every month, so they need to keep the consumer engaged. That's relatively easy for Treatbox. Just stuff it with different snacks each month, and as long as it always costs the same, you have cost-effective customer satisfaction. Hey, you can even do this for video games. You can sell merch, cool knickknacks and baubles. I wonder if any company has tried this in the past. Video games are different, though. Mainly because games are expensive and take multiple years to make. And depending on the genre, you can expect to get a 20 to 40 hour game at the other end. That's more than fine for a single purchase game, of course. But if you're spending all that time and money, you don't want the player to cancel their sub after just 1 month. You have to find a way to extend their playtime. There are examples like JRPGs that can get over 100 hours, but you need more. You want more. So what have you said? Fuck it, just make the game longer. Who's going to stop you? The government? NASA? The founder gods live inside the hollow moon?
Not this time.
Say you had a super cool fireball spell the player unlocks after 5 hours. Screw that. They get the shitty fire squirt spell, and in 50 hours, they unlock the first level fireball. You have this king NPC that gives the player a plane to go to a new continent, and he's just 1 city over from the starting town. How about no, you flimsy, noodly fool? The king is now locked in a dungeon, and you have to complete 50 fetch quests before you can even unlock the quest to save him. That can only happen after 100 hours in the game, which is 1/20th your way through the main story. I'm being hyperbolic, of course, but this design has been tried and tested in JRPGs. Long as Pickles Games has some of the most acclaimed titles of its genre. There's a lot that needs to be built around these grind-focused games too, a reason for the grind in the first place. And I'll be damned, WoW was able to find that reason. It exploded onto the gaming market like me visiting the White House in 2006. The game opened with 5 million subscriptions, doubling that in just 2 years. WoW really showcased the profitability of grind-based gameplay. Yet the grind had to be made interesting. For some people, numbers going up is enough justification to bust out the old pee bottle. To most people, however, grinding is a deeply unfun task, feeling more like work than playing a video game. They need a bigger, more grand reason to be dedicating so much time to slapping hogs for hours on end. The sheer scale of WoW is their reason to play. Since playing the game takes so long, there is a massive void of downtime to fill. Multiple novels worth of story pour their load into the empty gaps. Pages and pages of lore about the world, a world you get to explore. If you hear about a cool place from an NPC, chances are you can just go there and get even more lore on the weird green fellas you've killed in the thousands on your journey. Your time investment in the world directly reflects how the world treats you, going from a level 1 shit shoveler to a level 60 manure excavator who everyone respects. It's like spending a week making food at a Christmas party. You spend all this time and effort, and at the end of the week, you can showcase how awesome you are to all your friends, family, and people you would rather be dead. I'm talking about you, Auntie Carol. You know you caused last year, you ungovernable fiend. This is raiding in WoW, the final fruits for all of your effort that you can't experience in any other genre. Raids are the capstones of storylines and can showcase the utter power of some villains by needing 20 to 40 of the world's strongest champions to even hope to defeat them. Putting all the skills and knowledge you've built up to the test, using everything you have learnt in your hundreds of hours of playtime, making you go through such a mind-melting task as moving slightly to the left. Truly, only the most brave, quick-witted, strong-willed, and powerful individuals can complete such a feat. Raids are so popular, in fact, people made the whole job grinding accounts to level cap and selling them. People were willing to spend absurd sums of money just to skip the grind and get to the good part, and there are no bones about how addictive it is. You can keep immersing yourself into that world, and into your character for as long as you want. The more time you spend, the more attached you feel, so you spend more time. There is no limit of time to spend in an MMO. The attachment isn't superficial either, because experiences like raids are gated behind spending time, gated behind grinding for hours upon hours reaching the level cap. So your time spent is a theoretical achievement, becoming a literal achievement later on as a little badge for your profile. The MMO acts as a land of memories for all the fun things you did, and if you decide to relapse on your subscription, you can't access that land anymore. Beyond that, what about the people you met in WoW? Much like arcades, MMOs are a social space that you have to pay to be a part of. Sure, you can meet in offline places or different parts of the internet, but if your friends were as invested as you, they still spend all their time in WoW, having fun without you, forcing you to only imagine what your friends are getting up to, like the dirty cuckold you are. I read an interesting paper that said people with low social skills are more likely to get addicted to an MMO. And yeah, that makes sense to me, because MMOs are the heavy lifting of socializing. It puts a bunch of people with an aligned goal to one place. It gives you stuff to do and talk about. And if you want to raid, you have to socialize at least a little bit. But guilds and raids are usually organized by one or two charismatic people.
That's a fucking 50 DKP minus! What the fuck was that shit?
And you can just slip under the radar if you want to. So there's never a need to actually make friends or be a likable person, because your friend group are always going to be here anyway, right? As long as you keep paying your subscription, you can always be around people who will talk to you. Most people are well adjusted enough to absorb these addicting practices and move on after they had their fill. Most people's socializations can benefit from games like WoW. Friend groups can be founded or expanded playing an MMO. But it's a combination of these more casual players and those who become addicted that make an insane money printer for these companies. Say what you want about the quality and legacy of companies like Blizzard and Square Enix, but they wouldn't be anywhere near the size they are today if it wasn't for the success of their MMOs. And there are a lot of companies that would also like that luxury. Enter the world of the WoW Killer, the 1001 MMOs that came out in an attempt to get a small slice of that pie. In the 2000s and early 2010s, it felt like almost every month a new one of these things came out. You couldn't shake a stick about a new Warner Bros. Property being slapped on an MMO being announced, then never being heard of again. Because MMOs as a concept seem easy to emulate. Just take a regular game and make it big, hard, and long. But it turns out, making a game the girth it needs to be to satiate an MMO playstyle takes a lot of time, effort, and money that you will only see a return of if you are among like the top 5 MMOs. MMO's player base may seem large at first glance, with it being the entire world and all, but if all these companies are trying to compete with the same player base, the millions of people interested starts to look much, much smaller. It doesn't matter what IP you bring to the table. It doesn't matter how much money and manpower you throw at it. There simply wasn't enough to go around. I want to point out just how much of a waste this was, because making an MMO isn't cheap or easy. New studios needed to be made, or old studios needed to be contracted to make these. Many people pour their souls into these games. They only had the slimmest chance of going anywhere. When these massive projects inevitably flopped, most of the people working on them were just fired, while the executives who mandated these pig-headed projects faced no repercussions. They can just go back to reading Forbes' guide on the best way to sell your own data for profit. So, if the problem was the player count, why not just make the MMO free to play? You'll make less money overall, sure, but you're not going to make money anyway if no one's playing your game. We know how much time people are willing to invest in these types of games, yet time is valuable. Just how much money would someone be willing to pay to save time? There was enough people selling accounts it became its own bannable offense. But what if you sold the ability to bypass the grind? Would that ever actually work? Making a product so dogshit people are willing to pay to not interact with it, while also being fun enough to keep playing. It's an idea so inherently stupid, there has to be a way to make it work.
I gotta figure out how to make money on this thing. It's simply too good.
In the never-ending race or second place that is the gaming industry, the idea of not charging for the game at all seems counterintuitive at best. People buy games to play games, and if you're not charging people for what they want, then how do you make money? A small aside to our current story is the little indie developer Bethesda, who came around and started selling horse armor in Oblivion. The item itself did nothing in-game, just gave your horse some nice digs. This little addition of this small DLC was maligned by gaming press, and for years after was laughed at and made fun of. People hated this idea so much, there was even a relatively successful indie game called DLC Quest, which whole premise was about how much they despise this armor, and has this rather foreboding line in its description. Thankfully, this is just satire, and all the DLC is purchased with in-game coins, but consider it a cautionary tale for the future. Unfortunately, we live in the future, and we know that warning was not heeded. Whether or not the horse armor actually made money, some people did buy it, showing what people are willing to pay for in games. This still wasn't enough to justify ditching the biggest moneymaker, the price of the game. There simply wasn't enough gamers. I mean, look at MMOs. Out of all the flops that were shoved out into the world, only a fraction of them stood the test of time. The gaming player base would have to expand greatly for this to work at all. Allow me to introduce Stephen Apple Jobs. With the invention of the iPhone came an accessibility to games never before seen, as displayed by this clip of a man shitting himself while playing Mafia 3.
Now.
Hey.
The main hurdle of video games, we had to choose between gaming or taking a dump.
Smell you.
Thanks to the innovations of Steve Jobs, you no longer have to choose.
Go to the bathroom. I can smell you shitting yourself.
You can shit in game at the same time, whether at work, home, or on the go.
Get up and go.
Causing the greatest increase in the gaming market since the adult diaper.
You're shitting yourself.
Not yet.
Yeah, that's how I'm starting this section, sure. This is about as much as respect as this new model deserves. Before iPhones, another device you can play on the shitter was the Game Boy, home to many of gaming's most influential franchises. Two of the most popular being Pokemon and Tetris. Pokemon was popular because, come on, it's Pokemon, the game that solidified how cool it was to lie to your friends at recess. And Tetris was popular because it was a very simple pick up and play game. Whenever you had a spare minute, like taking a dump, you could whip out your Game Boy and get a few rounds in. While being extremely influential, it also showcased the limitations of handhelds. They are gaming consoles. They could only be used to play video games, and were often bulky because of that, making it hard to find pocket or bag space. They were also looked down upon in adult spaces like work, being seen as toys for kids. In places like Japan, there was an exception to this, but for most of the world, You would never see someone using a Game Boy or a PSP at a place of work. Your boss and co-workers would all laugh at you maniacally, while yelling mean things at you while you cried and pissed and shit your adult diaper. This is one of the many hurdles of any industry based around leisure, missing the market of working adults. You could only get them for half the week when they're at home. But mobile phones completely changed that. They could fit easily in your pocket and on multi-use devices, making them socially acceptable to just have as an adult. This bust open the gaming market like they were the symbol for an imperialist regime that hung over New York City in 2001.
When things start changing right before your eyes.
It made it possible to sell games to someone at all hours of the week. However, it was only possible in an environment almost fully alien to games. Most people would only have 5 to 30 minutes to use their phones, the short end being taking a dump, and the high end is people taking their break at work. Also, games weren't just competing with other games, they are now competing with social media, which is free. This put mobile games to a bit of a tough pickle on how to monetize this new space. They, of course, initially started with porting arcade games, and charged $1 to $5 for them. These games are like Tetris, and easily fit into 5 to 10 minute play sessions, perfect for phones. But game developers would soon find out that even prices as low as $1 was too much for a phone, because doom scrolling Twitter was free, so games had to come up with how to make money while also not charging for the game. A searing pain enters your mind. An echo from the past starts to ring through your skull. You can take the games out of the arcade, but you can't take the arcades out of the game. In one of the many instances of gaming companies learning the wrong lessons from the past, mobile games charging for extra lives and continues became commonplace on the App Store. Games like Temple Run, Doodle Jump, or Fruit Ninja that wouldn't look out of place in an 80s arcade started popping up everywhere on the App Store. Simple high-score based games that would use their addictive nature to the advantage. Whenever you got a game over, you can spend some money or watch an ad to keep going, relying on people's inherent impulsiveness way more than if the game cost money up front. They even started to take inspiration from the main competition, social media, inventing a new genre of the social game. Unfortunately, they didn't copy being able to make fun of the richest person in the world, making him utterly miserable, but this genre does include the great titans of dung that are Farmville, Clash of Clans, and Simpsons Tapped Out. Games that spread like the Black Plague hiding in pig shit in medieval Europe. Giving the players daily rewards, they got their friends hooked on the game, enticing the rats to spread even further. Spread the games did, with mobile and casual games becoming the largest market for games. This did a number of things, namely making games more approachable to the general public. It's no longer toys for kids, and really smelly adults. But your smelly aunt too, because mobile games fill the new niche everybody has, those few moments of the day where you're not doing anything. As mentioned before, the Mafia 3 example,
you're shitting yourself.
With games and the phones they're on, there never needs to be a quiet moment, always just staring down into your tiny little black box. Far be it from me to decry this as some blight on society. I'm a zoomer. The person I've been describing is me, minus the Mafia 3 part, I swear. The only thing I want to point out is how strange it is on a primal level. It's not something humanity, or any other species for that matter, was prepared for. Yet we adapted to this new lifestyle in a matter of years. Almost like this was inevitable for humanity, to be staring at advertisements for the Rug Doctor and the vaguely racist mold killer commercial for a few extra donuts in The Simpsons Tapped Out.
30 seconds, spray and walk away is simple solution 2.
For what it's worth, it is actually quite impressive how games were able to adapt to free-to-play models. Games for the past decade at that point were primarily pay up front or subscription-based. Part of the reason could be because everyone was entering the Wild West of the App Store. A Wild West of only some of the extremely rampant racism and sexism. If you had the wit and luck, everyone had a pretty good shot at success. I wonder how our modern industry would react in this position. Entering a new market never seen before, championed by entirely free-to-play games.
You're shitting yourself!
Oops, wrong clip.
Foreshadowing as a narrative device, and
thus we enter the new gaming landscape of microtransactions. Because hey, the game's free. You can't complain about the devs nickel and diming you at every corner. They gave the game away. They have to make money somehow. And make money they did. In 2007, following the release of the iPhone, mobile games was just under half of console revenue, which is pretty good for a new industry. You know, credit what credit is due. Now, what's this here? In just 4 years, they eclipsed consoles, and by 2022, they make 1.5 times the amount of console revenue. Now that's impressive. It really goes to show just how... Oh, wait, I seem to have gotten the wrong date. This is the stat from 2016. Let's click onto the next page and... Oh my god! Why is there an Among Us at the top of this chart? I've talked about the two things that led to this complete market domination. The expanded market to anyone who has a phone, which is give or take everyone, and that these games are based around people's compulsive behavior. I want to talk about that second one, as well as how these two components interact. These games tickle the little funny gland in your brain in whatever unique way they can. They associate the feeling of your gland being played with every time you open the game. At first, they hand out rubs freely. Each time you open the game, you get an instant climax of satisfaction. The more and more times you play, the more it puts you on edge, drawing out the finish. Each time making you feel closer and closer, knowing you only have limited time to play with yourself. Eventually, you have enough of being teased, and shell out a couple of bucks to reach ahead, and then you fucking come like the little whore you are. Cut this part out, Jesus Christ. It is a very primal emotion these games rely on, and it's why it works so well in a general market, because of just how many ways you can twist it into new, strange, and unusual game mechanics. Building timers that make you wait days at a time for a permanent upgrade. Energy systems that limit how long you can play in one session. The combination of high scores and giving players continues to achieve them. Using a premium currency in order to multiply some other difficult to obtain resource. All of these make the player feel good when achieved. Surprisingly, you can still get that feeling, if a little muted, if you pay real money to speed up those processes, which you can repeat over and over for as long as you want. As annoying and trite these systems are, they are taking advantage of the medium. If you take the game at its word, play in short bursts, and stop playing when the game tells you to, you can have a satisfying free-to-play experience. But that's where the massive install base comes in. It just needs enough people to pay to skip the inconveniences. That doesn't matter if the rest are free to play, especially when it's making money in those people too. It is a common practice to give a free reward for watching in-game ads. The amount of ads you watch is usually small, but since it costs next to nothing to let you be in the game, and the rewards themselves are made up funny bucks, they can make a tidy profit of you just existing inside the game. And if you do ever slip up and spend something out of frustration, then well, that's a little bit of cheese at the end of the human rat maze now, isn't it? It's funny to say, or sad depending on your perspective, that on a human level we can recognize this shit sucks. But on a monkey brain level, this shit fucking rips, man. You're like an ape in a swamp of frogs. Like, normally people have a hard time detecting scams, and is why scams typically prey on the vulnerable. But the App Store, much like the arcade, is so obviously trying to get you to spend more money than you want, that whenever anyone is interviewed about them, they call them ripoff merchants. And that's teenagers saying this, the dumbest species on Earth next to the koala. Yet, if anything, this is a strength to these games, because they can be as blatant as they want, stuffing their pockets full of their own greed, until, like arcades, they explode into a noxious tire fire and fade off into oblivion, or governments step in and actually get things regulated. You know, whatever comes first in our whole world. While doing research for this video, I found a quote from journalist Ken Rudin, who was talking about the company behind Farmville, one of those social games I mentioned. If you didn't play it, you probably had an aunt send you a link to help milk her cows. The quote goes,
that they're really a data analytics company masquerading as a games company. What that means is they analyze all of the events that occur within their games when people are playing them, and they use that data to figure out what people are most likely to buy.
Farmville is an analytics company masquerading as a games company. I think that title is apt for any company making these games, and I'm sure these companies think of themselves this way too. The actual fun or any artistic merit is merely another point on the chart in the ultimate goal of becoming richer than God. And while this is true, it is hard to talk about games this way, because the investors who throw their weight around to make themselves feel important, they aren't the people making these games, it's the people doing the grunt work. Coding, art, writing, etc. I assume they don't think of these games that way, as soulless money generators. They pour as much of their heart and soul as they can to make sure these games are good. If at any point you had fun playing one of these games, it was because someone had to turn a spreadsheet called The Financial Benefits of Harvesting Souls of Sad Puppies and Kittens into something actually good that humans want to interact with. It's the executive coming up with the idea of bottled human anguish that gets paid millions of dollars a year. And I would be surprised if the actual developers were rewarded with a contract better than working at Lowe's. As this video is a brief history of the evolution of the games industry, surely this is the last stop. I mean, what could be worse than Clash of Clans? There are entire extinction events that are not as bad. What about a genre game that has combined almost everything I've talked about in this video, broken humanity down to our base components, only for the sake of maximizing profit, art and creativity, capitalism and soullessness, being smashed together like two trains on a collision course to their own oblivion? What I am talking about is gazing into the void that is Gachapon. Is this what looking at the event horizon feels like? All of humanity's feats and accomplishments, completely broken down and put back together by capitalism? What do you think my pity timer on 5 stars is? Should I pull on Boot Hill, or should I wait for the March 7th banner? To everyone looking at this screen and only seeing a dumpster fire, allow me to explain what a gacha is. Gacha is like a wheel spin game. You pay money to have a chance of winning something on the wheel. Seems simple enough, right? Okay, well, now imagine the wheel looks like this, with the odds of all these categories changing the more times you spin the wheel. You're not guaranteed to get the complete thing you wanted. Most of the time you'll just win a piece of the thing, and have to keep spinning to get more. The less likely an item can be won, the more valuable it is. Also, if you want something specific, you have to wait for the 1 month they're available. In essence, it's a slot machine where the reward isn't money.
Oh, a big one!
What makes gacha more than just your everyday pence dispenser is the type of rewards they give playable characters. Now that might not sound strange on first blush, but it would be like if you had a 1 in 200 chance to unlock Jaina Proudmoore in World of Warcraft as a playable character. One of the most important and beloved people in the world's lore can be part of your party, and all you have to do is spend 200 bucks.
Okay, an average size.
Or just be dedicated and lucky enough to pull her without spending anything. This is the paradigm that allows something as ghoulish as gacha games to exist, because I wasn't joking around earlier. When I said it costs 200 bucks to unlock Jaina, that's the low end. It can go up to $300 if you're unlucky, man. That's an absurd price to pay for a character in any game, but gacha games are party-based, so depending on who you want, and if you actually want to play the game, you will have to shovel even more money into the Gachapon abyss, getting the characters that synergize with your favorite character, your Unfi, if you will, your Oshi. That's an absolutely absurd cost, but nothing's too high for your little Pookie Bear, your snuggly wuggly, your grown man with a fucking dick and balls. It's not the only option, of course. If you don't feel comfortable spending that kind of money, you can always grind. These games encourage it. Quite a lot, in fact. If you are dedicated enough, you can get even the most rare characters down to a 50% chance. You just have to do it in the right season, then spend a month playing every single day, and not be tempted by the game telling you how much faster this will be if you spent a mere pittance of dash. Just do all that, and you have a 50-50 shot of getting the character you want.
Small one.
Honestly, it makes me feel bad for gamers. You're telling me this is a treatment they're subjected to? Maybe they are the most oppressed minority group. Maybe gacha is the worst thing that's happened since Pol Pot. Okay, but like, what happens after you get the guy you want? What do you do other than just gamble your life savings? A lot, actually. A lot of other things to buy, I mean. You don't just spend money on gambling, silly. Do you forget these are mobile games too? You have as many things to do as there is to buy. Hundreds of little mechanics which are intentionally tedious, that they conveniently offer an alternative to in the shop. To demonstrate just how many things you can buy, I thought I'd do a little sing-along, and you can count along at home. Are you with me? Alright, here I go. Arena goodies and heroic torches, stamina jellies, and chaos cake pieces. Every resource a building provides. These are the least of my favorite things. Arena tickets and Aurora compass, purity crystals and skill powder choice chests, experience stamina, juicy jellies. These are the least of my favorite things. Alliance tickets and magic cookie cutters, Garabo spyglass and some swift time jumpers, crystals of strength, swiftness, and purity. These are the least of my favorite things. Rainbow cubes and sugar gnomes and so many a topping piece. Total production by fragments and chocolate buttons, and I feel so bad. We gotta shake a leg here, people. We got a lot to go through. Various speed ups and so many crystals, sugar rough crystals and souls with the essence, current seasons, full shit fucking gotcha. These are the least of my favorite things. Pillars or bricks with an aurora pattern, mystic flower, those kingdom type passes, cookie cutters that cut into pulls. These are the least of my favorite things. Stamina, jelly, biscuit, dough, flames of unity. When I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my least favorite things and I feel even worse. That's right, folks. There is a total of 48, roughly, types of resources that you can buy. All of them are either gacha tokens, things that raise your playtime cap, items that fast forward time gates, or just anything you have to farm in the game, including EXP. Of course, this is just one example of Cookie Run Kingdom. No, I will not explain why they are or gingerbread men, I do not know. This is what's frustrating about these games, that there is actual artistic merit behind them. If you look at the Honky and the Cookie game and are able to parse their weird nonsense, they look beautiful, more than a lot of AAA games coming out today. The animation is sleek, the art is stunning, and the music is actually really good. I've been using the Honkai Star Rail OST for most of the section, so if you liked any of this music, you should go check it out. It's genuinely great, even down to the game's writing. It breathes so much life into these $250 JPEGs. You could even have hours-long text conversations with your favorite characters. How many other games can you even do that with? And all of this amazing work is in service of this glorified slot machine, and it honestly makes me so mad. Seeing a beautiful character design out in the wild, only to find out it's from a gacha game, must be up there in those lists of extinction events, next to Clash of Clans. And honestly, good on all these artists, coders, voice actors, etc. on getting that bag. Keeping these clearly very talented people's bellies full of Dr. Pepper is great. And there is honestly so much more I want to talk about in these games, but every gacha game is just like this, or worse. There is honestly so much more I would love to talk about these games. Their very existence makes me question what it means to be human, more than a close encounter with a bear in the woods ever could. But I need to keep this concise, with the main takeaway I want from this being gacha is an accumulation of everything I've talked about. If the App Store was like having my mind altered by Cthulhu, then gacha games are like having my mind eviscerated by Azathoth. It completely changed the way I think about games. It also changed the way the game industry thinks about them. Games were never a small industry. Arcades were worth billions even when they crashed. But the gaming market has only increased exponentially over the years. It is now worth over $180 billion. To contend with that just outstanding statistic, game budgets and time to produce has only gotten higher and higher. Even with all the time and money poured in, so many AAA games flop or barely break even. Take a look at this list of AAA games that came out in 2023, and you tell me how many you even recognize. Then compare that to gacha and mobile games. They're relatively cheap to make, and rake in orders of magnitude of what it takes to develop. And you got AAA devs salivating like a damn dog. The tongues rolling out of the mouth that start bashing the heads with a hammer that rip off the pants and jerk off. As the game industry has and always will, they will throw money at a trend in hopes of being the next big, large top dog. In the past, this was done for sheer greed, causing all sorts of destruction in its path. Yet, in a way, it's no longer just about greed. Well, it is mainly greed, it always will be, In the past year, the industry has been facing massive studio closures and a record number of layoffs. This industry is like the Ouroboros eating its own tail for the past 50 years, and now it's close enough to eat its own head. It has fattened itself on its own tail for so long, they can't move fast enough to adapt. They can only keep on what they've been doing, bite onto the next trend and graft it onto itself. Fund 1,000 data analysis teams to wring out a little extra blood from their players. That's all they know, and I'm sure we will see AAA gacha games in the future. Or at least some version of it in Fortnite. Maybe they turn the emotes into a gacha. Ooh, I hope I get lucky on my 5-star and hit a 50-50 on the floss.
Oh, a big one!
To bring this video to its last stop, I want to wrap it back around to Borderlands 3. Yeah, I know, remember when this video was about that? Because I want to talk about the rot this history of greed has led to in modern games. Gaming has always been a weird industry. Weird for where it asks you to go, what it asks you to do, how it asks you to act, what it asks you to ignore. The Gearbox software game Borderlands 3 asks you a lot of the same things, as does every other modern AAA game. BL3 is odd for why it's asking you these things, because from what I can discern, it isn't money. Gearbox wants you to buy the game and its many DLCs, of course, but that's where the things you can buy end, with the game stubbornly digging at its heels with the industry moving around them, because there's nothing in the game asking you to buy ammo for special Pandora bucks, like some sort of gacha game. Once you've bought the Pandora's Box collection on sale for like 30 bucks, that's it, for the whole Borderlands franchise in fact. It's such a good deal, there has to be some sort of catch, right? But there isn't. The current state of the gaming industry has left me with this feeling that two slimy salesmen wearing trilbies are gonna jump out from a rock and try to sell me some horse armor.
It feels like somebody wants to sell me something!
I told you he was on to us!
BL3 does have things like anytime you teleport to home base, you get Eiffel Towered by two hunky men talking about the cool new DLC you've already bought. But there is still the overwhelming presence there. Has to be more than that, right? You go the route of Honkai Starfuckers and throw a couple babes and babettes into the side of the screen, with each ability press causing a cutscene with a babette's titties bounce in defiance of Newton's free laws of motion. That's what Diablo did, not the man breast bouncing, though I hope they're considering it during the next earnings call. Diablo, which fills a similar space as Borderlands, being the de facto Ludum games of their genre, became a free-to-play mobile game. It was a contentious decision, to say the least, but there's no doubt in my mind it made more money than if it was just a regular-ass game. I mean, if you take a step back and just consider the CEO of Gearbox, Randy Pitchford, who, let's be honest, was one of the most scum-sucking CEOs in gaming. I mean, we are talking about the same guy that tried to market his studio's failed Overwatch killer by advertising the Rule 34 subreddit of that game that he may or may not have been a moderator of. He even, allegedly, took the money given to Gearbox to make an Aliens game and funneled it into the first Borderlands, while outsourcing the Aliens game to a third-party studio, causing the final result to look like this. You're telling me this guy wouldn't put any of the bullshit I'm talking about into this game? Really? This fucking weirdo? I want to step back from everything here, and go back to a few questions I asked at the start of this video. Where does this type of game even come from, though? Was there some great turning point that changed how games were made? Maybe a slow escalation of game design to complete, in my opinion, slop. Or was gaming always like this, from the moment that video games entered the public conscious? As I hope I showcase in this video, we've pretty much started here. What is a quarter per play arcade cabinet if not microtransactions? It's almost a dictionary definition I just made up and put on the screen. Arcades are much more primitive compared to today's microtransactions, like a caveman smacking you in the head with a club and holding out its hand after each smack saying, Give Grog rock, Grog smash head. Compared to the Rube Goldberg-esque obfuscation used today, to hide the fact you are paying for much more than Grug charged to get your head bashed in. Really, gaming as an industry peaked earlier of arcades, that when they crashed in 1983, gaming spent years after trying to catch back up, which it achieved in 2007, as games became a form of data analysis, then entirely surpassed when Games as a Service, or GaaS, hit the mainstream in the COVID lockdown. So, to answer all of my questions, in 1983, gaming achieved its penultimate form of greed, after which, games slowly climbed its way back to that peak, and finally, in 2007, the peak was surpassed with the advent of the Gaming App Store, which led to the biggest turning point in the history of gaming. Which leads us to the gaming industry as we know it today. Normally, this would be where the video ends, giving you the conclusion to this hour-long deep dive into the history and practices of the gaming industry. However, there was one final question. I asked it before I even started working on this video, and that's, why do I think about games this way? Thankfully, the answer doesn't require over an hour to explain. I hate modern AAA games. I hate them. 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 I hate that every game's menu looks like McDonald's kiosk. I hate that player expression is at a premium. You have to pay 20,000 Funko Bucks, which is actually $10 just to buy a keychain. I hate battle passes that reward you for spending all your free time grinding, that make you feel like you've wasted that time if you don't buy the Super Weedy Hut Junior Deluxe Pass, that actually has more than one skin you want on it. I hate that games cost $120 in my country and still have all this bullshit in them. I hate that even when I go out of my way to play AAA games that don't make me want to time travel to personally test how sharp guillotines are. All of these practices are so ingrained it feels like I'm playing those other games anyway. Borderlands 3 is an 8 out of 10 game. The gunplay is great, the skills are awesome, but it does drag in a few parts. Yeah, that's my video why I don't like modern AAA games. Instead of ending it on that pretty sour note, I thought I would at least bring up games I actually play. Mainly indie games, you know. I thought I'd add a little lighter note and recommend you some games you can play. Because whatever you can't get out of the modern game industry, indie games will always be there. If you want to play a game made by Gearbox as a shooter, it doesn't make you feel like it'll blow your brains out like I do, consider checking out Risk of Rain 2, or 1 for that matter, that got a remaster recently. It is a roguelike shoot 'em loot game. To me at least, it's damn near perfection. If you're looking for an arcade game, check out Suki Escapes. There's like 15 different VTuber versions of it. Just play the original. It's good, arcade, high score fun. As far as MMOs are concerned, pretty much anyone that's been defunct has a pretty active private server. I'd recommend Monster Hunter Frontier. Note, if you do decide to play this MMO, let it be known you will fall under the curse of a Monster Hunter fan. A fate worse than many extinction events. If all you want for a mobile game is numbers going up and giving yourself a feel-good dopamine, I'd recommend Evolve Idle. It's not on phones, at least I don't think it is, but that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. If it was on a phone, I think my productivity would finally reach 0 somehow. And finally, I'd recommend Monster Sanctuary. Not that it has anything to do with this video, it's just a good game. But I guess I mentioned Pokemon once, okay? This is like a better Pokemon there, go play it. Alright, credits have rolled. Thank you, goodbye. The game industry is shit. Play indie games. Woohoo!